Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I think we are well said on the role of having clarity in this space, which is what Chairman McHenry is aiming to do. I want to thank the Chair's comments here, and last week I sit on a second committee. It's called the Ag Committee, and it has oversight on digital assets. I had the pleasure of talking with the CFTC Chair, Binham, on his thoughts on market structure and what we're discussing today. His thoughts on this legislation was that a much-needed change is in order to give clarity to the digital asset ecosystem. Right before CFTC Chairman Binham testified, however, we saw his counterpart, SEC Chair Gary Gensler, charge Coinbase with listing digital tokens he deemed to be securities. Chair Gensler went so far as to say that we don't need more digital currency. We already have digital currency. To quote, it's called the US dollar, it's called the euro, it's called the yen, end quote. So let's make one thing very clear that the rest of the world is already attuned to. Chair Gensler's blockchain innovation and technology is here to stay. It's thriving, and the US market needs to be able to appreciate it. This lack of consensus among our federal regulators, however, on the appropriate regulatory treatment of digital assets is what we need to discover and why we're here today. The inconsistent treatment by federal regulators underscores the urgent need for Congress to pave clear rules of the road for both market participants and investors. If Congress does not act and lets federal agencies to continue to engage in territorial disputes and empire building, this will have a grave national concern, both for our trade as well as for our national security. From this sentiment, Europe, the UK, Singapore have all marched out as leaders in this space. They've worked effectively within their jurisdiction. In fact, MiCA is real. Venture capital investment in Europe in crypto projects are up to 1,000% in 1 year alone. Investment that could have been happening in US markets. To my home state of Iowa, these represent real tangibles. They're American jobs, they're future investment. To America, it means innovation that is fleeing offshore. That is why this legislation that the chairman has brought forward, I believe, is highly important. So, Mr. Garrison, your former boss, the SEC commissioner, Hester Pierce, explained how a digital asset may be offered as a sold initial security based on the initial transaction it's offered in, but the digital asset may later be offered outside this investment contract. You spoke with my colleague here earlier today. Highlight specifically how this proposed legislation would address that.
So the market structure bill would address that by providing a clear exemption for issuers that would like to sell a digital asset pursuant to an investment contract. So if you want to build a network and sell the digital asset that is required for the network, this bill would allow an exempt transaction for up to $75 million within a 12-month period. It would allow for individual investment limitations for non-accredited investors to purchase in. There would be robust disclosure requirements. The disclosure requirements would be tailored to the needs of token purchasers, of digital asset purchasers. And it would place restrictions around activities that people want to engage in the US but currently cannot.
So this would provide a clear framework. Absent this legislation, we would be like Coinbase and have to come to Chairman Gensler on a come and register approach, meaning that everyone would have no clear guidance but would have to go and have a sniff test done by the SEC, which at this point has been only punishing, no carrot, no incentive, no guidance. Is that correct?
Yes.
Mr. Sexton, the proposed legislation that we've been discussing imposes significant consumer protections. Requirements that all digital commodities intermediaries register with the CFTC would have to be met, most notably the segregation of customer assets. What are your thoughts on a customer protections provided for in this legislation?
For your question, the customer protections provided in this proposed legislation mirror the customer protections that have been in place for years with regard to the regulated futures markets. Customer assets, capital, disclosures, Congressman, you can go down the list within the bill, but those have been in place for years.
Would the NFA have the ability to implement these new standards with the CFTC?
We totally have that ability to work with the CFTC to do so.
So for the consumer, for the process, for the providers, and for the national security of the United States, this legislation makes very good sense.
Gentleman's
With that,
time has
Mr.
expired.
Chair, I yield my time.